Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and this is going to be a direct video response to EagleEye 1975, the video that he put up just today. Breaking news: radical Islam still violent and abhorrent. I've put a link in the description, and I have a feeling this will probably be approved before the day is out, so you'll have access to his video, and I recommend you watch it also because there's a lot of good arguments that I myself would normally make on a subject like this. So in lieu of the fact that he's made most of the primary points that I would make with regards to the specific nature of the story in question, I'm going to attack it from a more general philosophical angle. People by nature cherry-pick the things that they like to be outraged about. And truth be told, I kind of do this also. I often complain time and time again about the abuses that governments perpetuate against people. But the truth is that at a more fundamental level, the problem with death and violence is not so much a governmental problem or a private citizen problem. It's not an ethnic problem, and I would argue it might not necessarily be a religious problem in the general sense, though specifically it often is. It's a human problem. And the reason why it's a generally human problem is further amplified by the inherent hypocrisy of this selective outrage that people have. And the outrage that I'm talking about in question is the outrage that EagleEye is actually reacting to out of ones John Paul Prime and Coughlin616, aka Coughlin the Crybaby. I think he's actually subscribed to my channel, or at least he used to be, if he's not anymore. And the reason why I think he was subscribed was because of all of the anti-war on terror videos I've made. And this is going to touch upon the first and most fundamental point that I'm going to hit right now. Coughlin is bitching about people like Thunderfoot, Pat Condell, to an extent probably also Richard Dawkins and Geert Wilders and other people like that, because they're saying things that should not be said, at least according to commonly accepted standards of political correctness. But I just want to analyze the general tenor of this selective form of outrage. If you go back to Thunderfoot's early videos, if you go back to some previous videos that Pat Condell has done, if you go back to previous videos that EagleEye has done, or ones that I have done, since I'm more blatant on this particular issue, not a single one of us supports the abhorrently disgusting foreign policy that America and certain European countries have engaged in the Middle East. I'm about as anti-war as they come, although I'm not directly anti-military. I just don't support the military's mission, and as a result, I can't really support the military as it is today if they're in a mission that I don't agree with. The first couple of videos that Thunderfoot actually made were anti-Iraq war videos. There is a difference between what I view as the general cultural trends at large and people that do possess some level of critical thinking. Now, for everybody's general knowledge, I'm not a big fan of Thunderfoot. In fact, I can't stand the guy. But even a broken clock can be right twice a day. Pat Condell, got a little more respect for him, still says a lot of stuff that I think is garbage, but on the long haul, a lot of things that he says are actually correct. EagleEye, I'm probably more in line with than him, but even there, there's some pretty strong divides. But I have the ability to disassociate my own personal biases when I need to in order to actually take a look at factual data and come to reasonable conclusions. And I think this is something that is lacking amongst other parties, particularly the two parties that I mentioned previously. The great crime that's been committed by the four of us, supposedly, is that we are openly opposed to the general cultural ramifications of Islam as a whole. And I'm not going to make the distinction of radical Islam. I'm going to say it up front for everyone to hear right now. Islam in general. I've read the Quran. I've read a officially Arab-approved English translation. I've also paged through the 4 different hadiths. I haven't read all of them in their entirety, but I've read a fair amount of each of them. And I can tell you firsthand that the things that so-called radical Islamicists are doing is stuff that is doctrinally supported. There are websites that actually document all of these specific Quran and Hadith quotes, and from those you can pull out all of the things that radical Islam preaches and teaches, which most clear-thinking people in Western civilization would find utterly disgusting. Doesn't mean that Islam is the only guilty party here. However, at present, when you have over 1 billion affiliates and they are all walking in lockstep on these issues, there is definitely room for criticism. The great crime that Thunderfoot's committed is not that he criticizes religion as a whole, which he does. His great crime is that he has devoted any attention at all to the one religion that you're not supposed to rip on. It's okay, it is acceptable in present-day culture to either love something that's terrible and want to invite it into your own country, or to say that you love something that is terrible and try to use violence to keep it out, which is what neoconservatives do. But honestly, saying that you disapprove of something, but then at the same time saying, we don't want to harm these people, we just want them kept away from us so they can't harm us, that is a crime that's unforgivable. I have been told by certain people who I have blocked from my channel that because of things I've said about Islam, I'm worse than the Nazis. The Nazis actually went out and killed people in the name of an ideology, but me, for actually quoting something and saying why I don't like something, I'm worse. Political correctness does not have a problem with violence. If it did, all of the people that support Barack Obama would stop supporting him because of the stuff he's done in Libya and the stuff he's done in Afghanistan and all the secret CIA shit he's got going on in Pakistan, in Yemen, and all these other countries. Political correctness has no problem with violence, so long as it's a form of violence that they approve of. What political correctness has a problem with is the truth. You got a good dose of truth there on EagleEye's channel on that particular video. And you'll notice he has twice as many dislikes as he does likes. So if anybody on among my subscribers, if you want to do a good thing, go over there, watch his video, and then thumb it up. Because quite frankly, I think EagleEye needs some support on this. And I think a lot of other people that hold similar views need support on this. It is good and right and rational to oppose America's current foreign policy. But it is also good and right and natural to understand that simply because we do not wish to engage in a certain form of violence against a certain group of people does not mean that we approve of what those people want to inflict upon the rest of us. I am perfectly fine with the Palestinians having their own state, having their own nationally recognized country. But at the same token, if they're going to conduct themselves the way they have, Israel is free to do whatever they want to them. I don't support Israel. That's the other thing, too. I'm not a dispensationalist Christian. As far as I'm concerned, Israel has no more prominence and no more legitimacy than any other country on this planet. They're not ordained by God, nothing like that. They resemble a Western nation a bit more, so if I wanted to live somewhere, I might prefer to live there as opposed to Bahrain or Yemen or someplace like that. But that doesn't mean I support everything they do. People like to oversimplify and overgeneralize things. And people like to think that they're doing good simply by doing good by the underdog. And this is again where this political correctness comes into play. The downtrodden are not always decent people. the two terms are not mutually synonymous. A person can be poor, and they can also be a son of a bitch. The poor are not endowed with some sort of moral superiority because they lack the wealth of other people around them. And the culturally bankrupt shouldn't be subject to adoration simply because they're bankrupt. They should be instructed as to a better way of doing things. And that's the one thing that everybody's afraid of. Nobody wants to hear about, somebody going over to these people in the Middle East and saying, you know something, this doesn't look like it's working too well for you. Why don't you try something else? The thing that I said earlier about violence and destruction being a human problem is true. However, there are people among us who, at least on a political front, are trying to do something about it. And as far as I'm concerned, the people that generally have the right idea about how to fix this stuff are the people that saying we need to have boundaries. And multiculturalism doesn't believe in the concept of boundaries. Multiculturalism is repulsed by the idea that people should be distinct from each other and that individual people should choose whether or not they want to associate with others. And heaven forbid an individual use reasoned debate in arguing why they don't want to be associated with others. That's the cardinal sin right there. Coughlin 616 is not a rational person. He's just an atheist who is such because he doesn't believe in any established concept of God. That's it. Doesn't mean he believes 2 + 2 = 4. And I think the sooner that people on YouTube, atheist or otherwise, figure that out, the better. And by the same token, I think people should wake up to the idea that just because people like me don't approve of what's going on in the Middle East does not mean we support what's likely to happen if we bring the Middle East into our own country. I'm all in favor of restricting immigration from certain areas on security grounds. I get in trouble with some of my libertarian friends over that, but that's something I actually disagree with them on, at least for the time being. When it has been demonstrated that a person has the cultural maturity to handle living in a Western nation, I'll think differently about it. This isn't a question of me desiring to preserve my genetic line and the lack of melanin in my skin. This is an issue of life and death. And the truth is that there are people in this world who are culturally unsafe. It's not a question of who their parents were per se. It's a question of what they've been taught and what they believe. And for too long, people have been arguing that what people believe has no bearing on what they do. It's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard of. If somebody says, if a feminist, for instance, says, I hate men, it naturally follows that when that same woman falsely accuses somebody she doesn't like of rape, that was the reason why she did it. That gave her the motivation to do that. Ideas motivate people. And when you have an ideology like Islam, where it has a book that's regarded as a sacred text in the Hadiths and in the Quran, which state that most of the occupants of hell are women, I think it's pretty safe to say that somebody who believes that isn't going to fit in a country where women have equal access to the workplace, and that women are granted a form of liberty that's generally frowned upon in that part of the world. And notice again, once more, I am a very outspoken anti-feminist. I don't like feminism at all. I don't want it in my house. That doesn't mean I hate women. But again, from the oversimplified, dumbed-down mentality of political correctness, that's exactly what I'm seen as whenever I say that. When I say that under no circumstance is a woman going to order me around, that's considered on par with radical Islam. There's no distinctions made. And why are there no distinctions made? Because political correctness doesn't deal in distinctions because it lacks the rational capacity to make such distinctions. That's the issue here. And the sooner that Coughlin and others like him figure that out, the better the rest of us will be for it, because people like Coughlin do vote. And when they vote, people get into office that allow things like what paved the way to this unfortunate situation in Norway happening. Right-wing people might be scary. I mean, I'm not particularly crazy of the idea of white supremacy, but people are motivated by what goes on around them. And if you don't want to associate with white supremacists, the best thing to do is to just leave them alone. And as EagleEye pointed out himself, Islam is predicated on the concept that you're not to leave anybody alone. Everybody's fair game. Everyone is ripe for either conversion or a scimitar to the neck. Or, in this modern age, a bomb belt and a true believer to deliver it. Anyway, I think I'm going to cut this short now. I think I've said all I needed to say. For anybody who wants sourcing on the particular stuff I was discussing, you can go directly to EagleEye's video and you can find the sources that he used. Until next time, with prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.